Hi, good morning, BPNs. I'm Miss Angela Huang, and with me is Miss Chu. And for today's assembly program, we'll be learning more about individuals with special needs through the eyes of a mother. We have Miss Chu Kai here, a mother of Sebastian, a 24-year-old with autism spectrum disorder. She is here with us today to share about her personal life story and also her counseling experience with struggling parents. We hope that through this sharing, we will develop better understanding, empathy, and open mindedness to such individuals. Now I'll pass the time to Miss Chu to start her sharing. Miss Chu, please.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think I'm going to start presenting my screen.
Here you may start.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Sorry. As you can see on this first slide, you'll see that I have many roles as a mother, an author, an advocate, and as a founder. But of all the roles that I've listed, being the mother of Sebastian has been the most life transforming. Not because of motherhood, but because my autistic son has challenged me to realize what it truly means to be a human being. So I hope that this talk will plant the seeds of change within you as well, particularly in your relationships with your classmates with special needs. So I just start with some cute baby photos of Sebastian. So as you could see, there's really great eye contact and everything. This was him when he was about 4 months old. Then subsequently, we call this a flat facial affect, and you can see sort of the eye gaze kind of as away from people and the challenges we were experiencing. So this is him at 2 years old, doesn't respond to his name being called, no eye contact, he did not point. At that point, before even developing any speech, he was making sounds like baba, boo boo, but he wasn't even talking, but he lost the sounds as well. At some point, no interest in people, and it was difficult for us to go anywhere that was not routine. He only wanted to go to a place called Santa Monica Pier. We were living in LA at the time. So the meltdowns and the outbursts that would happen for no apparent reason was extremely difficult. So fast forward to when we came to Singapore, I decided to homeschool him, and he was 8 years old at the time. And I developed a special curriculum that was actually linked to his daily life in order to have relevance for him, and used a lot of visual, tactile, and kinesthetic learning elements because he wasn't someone who could actually go to a mainstream school because he didn't speak much and he wasn't very interested in a lot of academic work, and he didn't converse like most of you can. So we developed this learning curriculum, and I discovered that he was able to learn independently with a scaffolded worksheet. One of the big things for me at the time was because he had some aggression tendencies, was that I used this thing, which is something that you guys might be familiar with. It's called behavioral management, in which, you know, if you behave properly, you'll be rewarded for what you wanted. And then if you didn't, then what you wanted would be taken away. And so at the time, I thought that I was teaching him important life lessons, like making good choices, taking responsibility for his decisions, and showing respect for rules and consequences. I also exposed him to life skills, especially when I discovered that he was very likely not going to go to college. So I wanted him to be learning how to cook. That's him on the left-hand side, making special noodles. That was how we actually got him to eat vegetables, by putting the noodles, the vegetables inside the dough. And also working out to make sure he didn't gain a lot of weight So he started to become fit. So I thought all was going on pretty well up to the time when he was about 13 years old or so, but things started to change. And so be prepared for the next slide. So he entered puberty sort of in a very difficult way when he hit about 15 or so. At that point, he actually developed sensitivities towards all the hairs that were growing out all over the place. So he wanted his hair cut all the time, like almost once every 2 weeks. If I didn't want to take him, he would actually take a pair of scissors and just cut his hair. And there'll be like a big hole in the middle, and I'll have no choice but to take him to the hairdresser. And then he even took a razor and he shaved off his eyebrows. And when I removed the razor, he would actually use his fingers to pluck out his eyebrows. So this actually happened very often when we went on holidays. So the first day would be lovely, and by the time he comes up in the shower, he would have no eyebrows. So that was actually a frequent occurrence. So we didn't have very nice photographs of holidays. And so things became very, very challenging. So do take note of that interesting painting, because I'll be talking a little bit more about paintings later on, because this is one of the paintings that he created during one of his encounters after an episode that involved police and stuff like that. So actually things got so bad, I was being attacked by him. So that lower bottom picture of me is me with an ice bag on top of my head. Very often it's because he pushed me and my head would actually hit the wall. He would just get angry if I even say things like, please change your shorts, I think it's a little too small for you. He would also bang his own head. So you can see at the top, the head is very red. So he could actually bang his head so loudly, his fist that it sounds like a basketball hitting the concrete. So for a while, I was very traumatized by sounds like that, or hearing people do construction. And then on the left-hand side, you can also see he was trying to find his own fashion sense. So as some of you are actually possibly going through your own teenage years, you might maybe relate to some elements of it. Is actually Sebastian, my son, trying to, assert himself, assert his own personality, assert his own identity, except that, he didn't look on the internet for fashion ideas, but he didn't care anyway because he had his own sort of thinking. So, he was playing around with a ribbon that came out from a present that, the students got in class because he went to a tiny little school part of the time. And then he actually tied that ribbon around his neck. And he didn't want to take it off, and he was really, really proud of himself. Like, wow, look at me. I'm just so handsome looking. And I didn't even dare to do anything. He actually took a public bus wearing that ribbon. Okay, so yeah. So here I wanted to show you, the beautiful painting. So at this point, his painting talent really kind of exploded. And in retrospect, I realized that that was truly the expression of his emotions. Because even though Sebastian could use words to express what he wanted, like what he wanted to eat, make requests, language in terms of the verbal elements was not something he preferred to express himself, especially the deepest emotions. So actually, he expressed his emotions through paintings. And painting helped him to regulate his emotions. And these were all the things that we sort of understood along the way. So painting really helped him to regulate and feel better. So he paints because he needs to paint. And so when he was going through a very hard time with the police, we had a couple of episodes. He was running out of the corridor in his underwear. That's almost like another different story, but okay, I have to give you the story. Because he actually jumped on he was also very physical at that point, trying to discover his physical prowess. And he actually jumped onto the sink in his bathroom, and he tore the whole sink out from the wall. And then he was so alarmed by what he had done that he actually shrieked through the corridor, looking for me because I was out at the time and thinking he would wait at the elevator for me, even though I was out. And he just thought that if he waited long enough, the elevator, I would eventually show up, but he was still in his underwear.
Oh.
And the neighbors called the police, and the
Oh.
police couldn't coax him to return to the house until I showed up. And so this was actually very, very difficult. And I was so furious with him at the time. I still really didn't understand. I was furious at this broken sink, broken wall, and what he did. And so there was a lot of difficulties. I struggled to understand what had become of my son. So there was like a struggle to reconcile the two sides of him. Like, he was very much more talented. He was much more hands-on with a lot of things, but he was also breaking a lot of things because he wanted to do many things. So he didn't have a gentle touch, this boy. And so what I did was I started A Mother's Wish back in late 2013. At the time, I had this vision that I wanted to create and leave behind a community for him when I die, which would serve as an alternative family for him. So I allocated 30% of the sales of Sebastian's paintings towards A Mother's Wish, and we organized and subsidized the activities for autistic individuals during school holidays. So my belief at the time was that if the autistic kids were happily engaged in activities they liked, and there was all kinds of activities were really fun. We had like baking, arts and crafts, football, all kinds of stuff. And we had volunteers coming in who really also enjoyed helping the kids. As you can see, some of the students standing behind, they were actually students from Meridian Junior College. They would not have all their meltdowns. They would be happy. But actually, Sebastian would seem to enjoy the activities, but still come home and pull out the eyebrows, still bang his head. So I was just furious, and I would like shout at him, and so it was kind of like a vicious circle. So after 5 years of dealing with this, and things got so bad that I thought he would kill me inadvertently, not because he got more vicious, but because he got bigger. And I just couldn't take his strength. So I made the momentous decision to seek out an overseas solution and set up an independent life for him away from me. And it took us about 9 months in two different countries, but 3 different locations. And we finally settled on Bali. And it's been close to 4 years since he's lived there. So I will leave you in suspense about how it went. So you'll see me up there at the top. That was me sitting at this beautiful, really love, actually very simple, small hotel, but with this fantastic view of the forest, and you think that you're very far away into nature, but actually the streets is just like less than 5 minutes walk away, really. And then my husband with Sebastian on the flight on our way there, we were moving him on August 25th, 2016. And the bottom right corner is actually the very first villa we rented. And you can see that it is very, very far away from anybody nearby. And this had been a huge issue for us, with problems with neighbors when we were living in an HDB. So I'm always hearing complaints from neighbors about the noises he makes, sometimes in the middle of the night because he wasn't sleeping properly. I think the sleep issues could be some of the things that you guys can relate to, like you are having problems sleeping and you don't want to sleep at night and stuff like that. So yeah, so I wanted a place where we were so far away from people and you could really like live in peace. So that was sort of the idea. But this house was a bit of a nightmare. It's actually really hard to get to. It would get very soggy, the path leading towards it, and no cars could go in there. So I would actually fall into the sides of the rice paddies when I try to get there, and at night there's no like street lighting. So it was a bit of a nightmare of a house, this house, but it's very charming. Yeah, many stories. Okay, so now instead of any more personal sharing, I would actually like to talk about the inner world of the autistic person. And I refer to them as the autistic because a lot of adult autistics who can talk prefer to be talked about this way, and I sort of agree, because for them, being autistic is part of who they are, an important part of who they are, and they're very proud of being who they are. And so I also acknowledge it, and I feel that my son also feels the same way. And that the things I'm about to share with you are the things I learned from an Italian psychologist, another incredible story, whom we met in Bali. He doesn't live in Bali, but he loves to surf there. So This is what I've learned, and it just blew my mind, and it really helped me to understand my son from the inside and what was happening to him and why he was engaged in all the bizarre behaviors and what seemed bizarre at the time. So there's going to be a lot of things that I hope that you guys can relate to as well. And one of the things that I learned was that all of us experience something that we have in common with special needs people, and it's this thing called anxiety. And the thing is, anxiety, like for example, when you have exams, you'll feel anxious. And it's important for you to manage your anxiety so that during the exam, you will be able to still continue to complete the test papers well, and that your brain will be able to think. But if you get overly anxious, sometimes it's very hard for you to function. So one of the important things is for you to gain control of the situation, so you could manage yourself and breathing and stuff like that. So these are all the elements that all of us experience as human beings. And the things that help us to gain control are like behavior, communication, and relationships. These are the three elements that help us to manage our anxiety in life. So I want you to pay attention to this B, C, and R: behavior, communication, and relationships, and think about that in your own life. So the chief things I want you to focus is about behavior, because for autistics who do not, and even your people who can talk, the autistic people who can talk, very often they don't use it to talk about emotions. So anxiety is very much related to emotions. So behavioral outlet is a very big thing for them. But if you think about it, even we, whom I refer to as neurotypicals, we also have a lot of behavioral outlets. So you see the people like biting their nails, twirling their hair, which I used to do a lot, or people whom you see in the TV when they are, waiting for their loved ones outside the hospital room, pacing back and forth. These are all behaviors for managing anxiety. But in the case of autistic people, and people look at that and say, that is so strange. Very often, Sebastian was little, he would flap his hands, hand flapping, the rocking back and forth, jumping up and down, like a Maasai tribesman, I used to say. These are for regulating a lot of things like emotions. My son used to jump like that for when he dances. That regulates his excitement. But that's also a way of regulating things. And anxiety is a core emotion, but for autistic people, behavior is so important for regulating emotions. So now, here's the critical thing to look at. For neurotypical individuals, you are able to regulate any kind of very powerful emotions and anxiety through communication, relationships, and behavior. You have all of them because you can speak to other people. So when you're upset and someone came to you and said, oh, why are you like that? Or, are you okay? You can talk to them. Of course, if you didn't like the person, maybe you didn't feel comfortable talking to the person, but very likely you will have relationships in your life. Somebody you trust, your best friend, whom you can share your unhappiness with. So actually, that is a really wonderful way for you also to offset your anxiety or your powerful emotions. Like when you're very excited about getting a very good grade or something, you have somebody to share with. So then you don't rely on your behavior so much. But if you look down at the bottom about autistic individuals, so the B would be like, could be bigger for somebody who doesn't really have the communication. And by communication, I don't just mean verbal communication. We're talking about a communication that people can understand. For example, someone who does sign language actually has a shared form of communication with other people because they can use the sign language and someone would understand. Or like when we ourselves have certain non-verbal communication, like, if we put our two palms next to the side of our cheeks to say, oh, we are very sleepy. Very common kind of gestures that people understand. The huge issue with autistic individuals' gestures and stuff is that nobody understands them. People often misinterpret them. For the longest time, I didn't understand my son's gestures when he was, especially in his puberty, because he will move in a very sort of not aggressive, but sort of jittery fashion, and he was moving very fast because he was really powered by a lot of powerful emotions. So when he would lean forward towards me, I would often interpret it as aggression, but actually sometimes it's from the anxiety, and he's actually reaching out for help. But I didn't understand, and by my own reaction of fear and recoiling away from him, it actually made him very angry. And when you think about it, it's very insulting or very hurtful when somebody is coming towards you and they're trying to seek help, and you recoil away from them and you run away from them. So if you imagine these kind of episodes and misinterpretations piling up over time, what is happening to the autistic person can be extremely difficult and challenging. So I hope that you can sort of appreciate and really take a little time to digest this slide and think about it in your own life. The moments when you have very difficult times, how have you been regulating yourself? And how about people who then don't have all these elements to help them to deal with their emotions, and instead they have something like that's called behavior. And they have to let go of these emotions because they're human, just like we are. Like we would cry, or we would talk to somebody, we go to someone whom we love or whom we know care about us. But if autistic people have people who don't understand them, who are they going to turn to? So now, and I understand from some of the autistic people who can't speak, and they put them on Facebook, that actually when they get very, very upset, they would actually feel like banging their head, or bang their head sometimes because they feel like their head's going to explode. So suddenly all this thing like that, the head banging, doesn't seem so bizarre because you start to understand how challenging and difficult the lives for autistic people are. And I actually began to realize that my son, for 20 years of his life, was very misunderstood. And all the years I felt like I had what I call the parenting honeymoon, when he was conforming to my rules, actually came at the expense of him suppressing his own identity, of his own thoughts. And he was too small to sort of fight back against me until his puberty. And I gave him a lot of the hormonal changes and the power, and also that rebelliousness to strike out. And so these were also things that I think possibly you can relate to, not for me to encourage you to act this way, but you to kind of relate to what autistics can be going through.
Okay. We have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So now I wanted to share a little bit about advocacy that I've been doing. So as part of being a Mother's Wish, I do get contacted by families who are struggling with issues. So one such person actually was she contacted me and said that she has been harassed for a few years by a neighbor in an HDB situation, who constantly called the police and the HDB on her about the noises that her 2 autistic kids make. And so I've been counseling her and telling her to write, to the government and explaining the situation, because she had done a lot of things like petting her house, and she's so stressed out by all these attacks, and basically the neighbor wanting her to move out and stuff like that. And the story got carried by actually the Singapore Asian Parenting interviewed her, and subsequently Yahoo Singapore actually just carried the story. And she was really upset when she told me that when she looked at the comments to this Yahoo's publication of the article, there were thousands of them. And actually they were all condemning her and saying that she was inconsiderate and she should move out. And this really is a kind of a reflection of people still not really understanding the challenges that families with autistic kids go through. So this is actually what I would like to suggest for people to adopt a different attitude. For us, we need to see ourselves as ambassadors. In order to help autistic people and minimize their sort of behaviors that make them feel so stressed out that they need to break out and have meltdowns, we have to see them with different eyes and be really empathetic with what they're going through. So if they are doing something that's kind of upsetting, and it actually reflects the fact that they're upset, and we need to first think about instead of saying that behavior is so bizarre, we go like, what is happening with them? And really see it that way. And I think you'll see them with very different eyes if you were empathetic. The other thing is being respectful. It's kind of like being in a cultural exchange program. Like, how can I try to understand you if I want you to understand me? So how can we do that instead of trying to force my culture on you exclusively, like it's the best? The other thing is being non-judgmental. Praise them when they're doing something that's really great instead of just always saying like, oh, he's doing something wrong again. He or she's doing something wrong again. And the other thing is to be very loving, as caring about their well-being, not just about only like, oh, when they're doing something great and just go, oh, fantastic, but like all the time. Like if they're hurt, if they're crying, if they're whatever, or if they seem upset or they seem agitated, always care about their well-being. And finally, stay calm. So usually if they're very upset and having a meltdown thing, they are actually very, agitated inside. They don't need other people around them to be agitated. But you can say, okay, they are causing you to be agitated. The thing is, you have to be the ambassador, right? You're the one who is in the less challenging situation because you can talk to others, but they can't. So you need to stay very calm. And finally, be firm. But you cannot be a leader for them and a worthy guide for them if you're not calm. So these are all of the elements that we need to be in order to help our fellow special needs people like autistic people. And I want to show a sort of a cutie side of my son with all the so-called bizarre pictures of him. And but I think they show like different glimpses of actually him as a social self. He has great relationships with things, as you can see. I don't know whether you can see on the right-hand side, he's actually sleeping next to a Playmobil man on one of our holidays. And actually he had 3 characters and each little one slept with him on each night. He picked them. And see, he gave a little space for them. Then the left-hand picture at the bottom where you see him having a snack, with the shirt over his head, that's the sensory pressure. And he's looking at a mirror. See, and I call that a picture like I'm my own best company. And then also the vacuum cleaner that you see. See, he would actually like vacuum the house. He loved vacuuming. He would often feed the little pieces of trash to the bottom part that sucks up the trash, like as though he's feeding the little vacuum cleaner, and then hang out with the vacuum cleaner like that. So the reason is like people can laugh at that and say, what is that? Why is he like being so, having this relationship with things? And you think about it, for autistic people, it's much easier to have relationships with things. Things are not judgmental. Things are not mean. They can control things. So these are all the different things you can see to help people understand autistic people better. They are very human. They just want to have good relationships, but they don't want mean relationships. So, so just the suspension of that. What happened to Sebastian after we moved him? So this is him about 3 years later, but he's now in his 4th year mark. And you can see he's having a much happier life. That's us on holiday in the first picture on the left, and his 2 carers in Bali who are also enjoying him very much as well. We're knowing how to read him very well. Him in the school activity back when before COVID. Sebastian surfing, building stuff at carpentry, and we also now have a little tiny farm next door to where he lives. So yeah, so he's much happier now because he lives in a sort of environment where people recognize his needs, and also people interact with him respectfully, and he's also able to do a lot of activities that he enjoys. And we focus on his well-being, not about his outcomes. And so that's it. And I encourage you to learn more about us on our website.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chu. Yeah, thank you for taking time early this morning to share with us your personal journey as a mother of a child with special needs. It's very heartening to hear how Sebastian has learned to be where he is now and how your family and the caretakers are managing it. I wish you all the best for Sebastian and your family.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye for now.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay.
Okay, VPNs, I hope you've enjoyed Ms. Chu's sharing and learned a bit more about how we can help individuals like Sebastian and care about all the people with special needs in our community. To learn more about Sebastian's story and his artworks, you can visit amotherswish.com.sg on the page here, and there is a QR code for you to scan as well. Okay, so all the best for today. Enjoy the learning in school. I'm Miss Angela Huang. Anything, you can look for me at Staff Room 1. Okay, goodbye for now.